to HVG's Coffee Afternoon. I'm delighted to have a great lineup of speakers today who will be talking about remobilisation of volunteers, remote volunteering, and a continuation from last week's, not last week's, 2 weeks ago, on health and safety. If you have any questions around health and safety and risk assessments, please send them into the chat and we will pick them up ready for the final session today. As usual, we are recording and they will be available later on HVG's website, YouTube channel and social media platforms. Today, I'm co-hosting with Rhiannon, who will be supporting today's event, asking questions and monitoring the chat function. So without further ado, we'll start with our first speaker today, Becky Benson, who is volunteer manager at Birmingham Museums, and Becky will be talking about remote volunteering across Birmingham Museums. Welcome, Becky. Thank you for coming along today.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Will. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, I was asked if I just give a little bit of an intro to some of the projects that we've been doing during lockdown. So just for a little bit of context to start with, I'm the volunteer manager for Birmingham Museums Trust, and we're an educational charity that look after 9 museums and historic properties across the city of Birmingham. It's not all about the data, but just for a bit more context, in the financial year 2019 to 20, over 1,000 volunteers supported us, dedicating over 24,000 hours of their time. On the 16th of March, a little bit before lockdown, we suspended all of our on-site volunteering, and that impacted 300 regular volunteers who'd come in on a weekly or monthly basis. Quite a lot of our volunteering is project-based or one-day based, so that's how some of the numbers. But 300 volunteers immediately had their lives impacted by not coming in. In March, we started weekly emails on Mondays. April, we started virtual coffee mornings fortnightly for our volunteers. And in May, we started online volunteering. So it took us a little bit of time to get the kind of resources ready to engage our team to support us remotely. We started really with 4 key projects, working in the main with our collections team to see what areas our volunteers could support us in. And these were opened up to all of our current 300 volunteer strong team. The areas that we looked at were asbestos checklists, our accession registers, some artist research and a BioBlitz, which I'll come into shortly. So I'm just going to talk you through each project and how we went about it. So our first project was asbestos, and we started that in May, wrapping it up in July, and 16 volunteers signed up to get involved. We paired these volunteers up because what we really felt like was, one, that would help us from a data point of view. We would have 2 pairs of eyes on the same information, but also we felt in the early stages of lockdown there was an awful lot of isolation, and we wanted to support that as much as we could. So the idea behind this team is that they were identifying asbestos in our collection remotely. And this is part of our asbestos management plan for our collections. So all objects have to be assessed for asbestos before they're accessed by our staff. And this is a remote desktop exercise anyway, just ticking yes and no questions. And we felt that this was something that our team would be really interested in and able to support with. And I've never seen so much enthusiasm for asbestos. We did training via Zoom with our collections team, and then regular check-ins on Zoom too, but followed up with some emails and phone calls too. And together over the course of the few months, these volunteers checked over 3,000 of our objects remotely, which was incredible and made a huge difference. We wouldn't have done that without their support. We had to pause this project a little bit earlier than anticipated because one of our staff moved on to a new job elsewhere. But there was a lot of enthusiasm from the team to resume this in the future, and it's something we're hoping to start again in the new year. Our second project, also with our collections team, was looking at our accession registers. So we started this also in May, and it's now ongoing. And we had 8 volunteers, again, working in pairs on this. Our accession registers are obviously quite fragile documents, and we have photographed the majority of them, but it's not in a format that can be uploaded to our collections management system. So what our team are doing is transcribing the information in detail so that we can put it into a format that is then uploaded onto our collection system. Again, trainings and check-ins by Zoom and email, and this team have already transcribed 21 years of our registers, which is over 7,000 objects, which again is just a huge amount of data we wouldn't have been able to do without their support. Our most popular project, and I think lots of people could probably understand, is our research project. So 43 volunteers signed up to undertake some research with us. These volunteers are working in teams, so 2, 3, 4 people in groups, and we're researching artists within our collection that we didn't have a lot of information about. So we collated this project with some of our curatorial team, but also our collections team too, because one of the key outputs we were hoping was to fill in some additional fields in our collections management system. Again, training and check-ins by Zoom. And what we found with this project is people kind of drift in and out. It fits around their lives very well. So every month we will send a new set of artists, and people can opt in to do these artists, or they can say, actually, I'll take a break for this month, but I'll pick one up next month. So already this team have researched over 100 artists and organisations, which has then been uploaded into our collections database. Our kind of fourth project is with a different team, so that's with our learning and engagement team. And one of our key programmes over the summer, in association with Think Tank, which is one of our sites, was the Big Brum BioBlitz. And the idea was to encourage residents of Birmingham to explore their outdoor spaces, whether that's a window box, on their daily walks, in their gardens, and to just really engage with nature in the city. And this team of volunteers supported us with writing blog posts, sharing some of that information, highlighting areas that we could be, what kind of nature we could be looking for, sharing kind of craft activities, outdoor activities people could be doing. And they acted as real ambassadors for the project, so they took a real sense of ownership. We tied this into iNaturalist, which is an app that people use to register scientific information about the outdoors. And so all those volunteers signed up for that and just started to really shout out about what the project was all about. And together these volunteers really helped us to encourage the people of Birmingham to get involved. So they were our kind of 4 key areas that we're still working on. But we also did a bit of light touch remote volunteering too. So lots of our volunteers shared blog posts. We've had takeover days on our B&T volunteering Twitter account. And a really nice thing that came out was our newsletter that used to go out monthly to staff and volunteers. Volunteers started to really take an ownership over that. So sharing their favourite objects that they hadn't been able to see recently, sharing what they've been up to. So just a light touch thing involved. And the last thing I was going to mention as well was our summer volunteering programme. So normally every year, we started this in 2014, we run short 5-day volunteering placements across a number of our venues. And over the last 5 years, we've worked with 180 volunteers who are looking for something to do with their summer holidays, and that's that time. And obviously we couldn't quite do that as we had intended this year. So we took it online in a lot smaller scale. We did what we could with the resources we had, and we worked on 3 projects with 7 volunteers, a collections, a BioBlitz, and a social media project. And so from Monday to Friday, we had 2 or 3 new volunteers joining us. We started with a Zoom meeting, we introduced the projects and the staff involved, and we checked in the middle of the week. We checked in at the end of the week and really celebrated what they had achieved with us. These tied in quite nicely to some of the projects we'd already established with our current volunteers. So it was a nice way to introduce people to the world of our organisation. And I always think it's nice to to finish on some feedback from the volunteers. So we found in the main that our volunteers have really appreciated the opportunity to stay connected and to get involved. And as well as all that key information they've enabled us to generate and to have on our systems, it's made a difference to them. It's created a normal, it's given them something to do during lockdown, but it's also built up their skill sets too. So I will stop sharing my screen, Will. That's all I've got. But if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Brilliant, thank you, Becky. That was really interesting, and it was fantastic to see such a varied range of things. I never thought that you could do asbestos checking remotely. How in terms of the long-term plan, how do you plan for this to continue as you hopefully reopen and return to normal site operations?
Yeah, definitely. So we had kind of dabbled a little bit in online volunteering, but never to this extent before. And I think what's been really overwhelming is how our collections team have been impressed by how it works, if you see what I mean. So I have a real buy-in from them. Like, there is a lot of work that our team are looking at that actually people can do from home. And when we don't really know what the guidelines will be any minute at the moment, it's good to know that there's work and opportunities for people to engage with us whilst they might not be able to come to our venues. So what I've found is that some of our team are really keen to return, and we've started to bring some volunteers back, but a lot of our team aren't. And I know that a lot of people are looking for ways to home too. So we're working on a couple of other projects around our collections, and now quite a number of our curators are back from furlough too. We're looking around some curatorial projects that might be possible. So I see it very much always being there now, but maybe slightly a little bit less as we start to move forward with on-site, but something that we can look at.
Great, thank you. I've got a couple of questions coming in now. I don't know, Jess, did you want to ask your question directly to Becky?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask sort of what capacity this has been managed in, sort of how difficult it's been with the online aspect and with your existing volunteer group, and sort of whether it can be adapted to different size organisations, because I'm from Historic Community Trust and we're a hell of a lot smaller than the BMAG, and I really like the ideas here. So I just wanted to get your opinion on both positives and negatives of the management side of it.
Yeah, good question. So it's been me and 2 staff members from our collections team in the main who've been managing the project. Because obviously a lot of our staff went onto furlough. We didn't have a huge amount of resource. I found that the volunteers are relatively self-sufficient once they get going. So we had maybe quite a bit intense in May, starting off with training and doing the Zooms and making sure everyone felt confident. But what really worked well for us was having volunteers paired up, because they kind of support each other and they start to ask questions together before the questions come to us. So I would say from a management point of view, it's there's a couple of challenges every now and again, but they really do get it. And some of these tasks are quite straightforward, but they love getting to know more of the collection that they didn't even know we had. If that answers the question.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you. That was really helpful, and I probably would agree, because some of our sites are still under construction and we're not sort of officially open yet, but our volunteers are really keen to get stuck into sort of whatever they can. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Michelle, did you want to ask your question?
Hi, Becky. Yeah, I think for me it's around that moving things forward, and really sort of we're all going to be resource strapped, and how much do you want to give the volunteers that lead on things, so that they just get a directive, they take it forward, they move forward. But also one thing I just thought about afterwards was also it's that checking. So you had all those artists being researched. We all know there's a lot of rubbish out there on Google or wherever and everything. So how's that checking bit coming in?
Yeah, really good question. So quite a lot of this, the volunteers lead themselves to a certain degree. So the BioBlitz very much, they took the lead on areas they were interested in. Other areas like the asbestos checklist, we have the information, we have the objects, that goes to them and they can work through it. With the artists, we paired them up in larger groups for multiple checking, so they are checking themselves. And then we're very fortunate that we had a Museum Futures trainee with us, so that trainee was then doing like the final check before it went to our documentation registrar for another like quick scan through. So there is I think we have to kind of understand there'll be an element that actually, there might be a couple of mistakes in there, but actually it's worthwhile to have a lot more information that is available than to not have any information at all. So that's kind of how we made those decisions.
Great, Caroline, you had a question on best way to share contact information between volunteers. I wondered whether you wanted to bring in your question.
Hi, yeah, we tried something similar. I mean, we kind of sort of tried a bit of a buddy scheme situation, but actually really found we had hardly any takers. We've got a very similar project, Becky, in terms of we have people researching photographers, but I'm just wondering, like, how do you pair them up? Do you just kind of randomly put 2 people together, or do you kind of think like, is there a bit of matchmaking involved?
Good question. So I did a bit of matchmaking, I'm not going to lie. There were certain elements of like, actually, I think this volunteer will go really well and that will work brilliantly. Other volunteers have already worked together. So they would say, when we did our first Zoom, we asked if volunteers were happy to be paired up. We had a couple of people that didn't want to, and that's absolutely fine. We'll work around that. If they did, via email afterwards, we kind of introduced if they were happy to be paired up again, double check that in terms of data sharing, and also if they had people that they normally worked with, that made logical sense to do that. A couple of the pairs haven't worked as we would maybe have liked, but then they've then moved on to kind of a bit of individual work, and that does add an element of additional work from our side, but it works better for them. So good question, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, and one final question before we move on to our next talk from Helen. Helen, did you want to come in and ask your question?
Thanks. Yeah, Becky, I really enjoyed that. Loved the ideas. We are currently working on a similar one with the access registers team that would be similar to something that we're doing here. I'm really curious in terms of, you could talk to us a wee bit about how you did get the buy-in from the different teams that were involved in that. So collections and curatorial. I didn't get your job title. So are you the collections team, or if you could say a wee bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the volunteer manager and I sit in our learning and engagement team. So what I have found is that our collections team have a really strong buy-in around volunteering already, and they really kind of comprehend